Welcome to the Nerd Tutorial Podcast, a podcast offering discussions and tutorials about nerdy subjects for people who aren't necessarily nerdy themselves. With you today is myself, your nerdy tutor George, and with me here today, the amazing Spider Mom, my mom.
Hi.
So, today we had kind of a special request. We have a viewer who recommended that we should talk about this, and I think that we can't think of a better time to talk about it while it's still slightly relevant. We're going to talk about Spider-Man Far From Home, which just came out in theaters here 2 or 3 weeks ago. And then we're also going to talk about Comic-Con 2019, because basically Marvel was the only person of note to make any real news at this particular showing. So, Mom, what do you know about Spider-Man?
Okay, so I only know I saw the movies 20 years ago. Those were good. Or the movie, and then I've seen several. I've seen several of the more recent movies. I have not seen the cartoon, which I understand is really good.
Yeah, so I believe that's going to be Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. I'm told it's really good too. I haven't had a chance to watch it, but again, like everybody's telling me that it's like the best way you could do a Spider-Man movie. I guess in a certain way, it's just. The nostalgia factor, I think, is really good. But the Sam Raimi movies, which are the early 2000s Spider-Man movies, those are considered kind of like on the top, kind of like a top tier set of superhero movies by some of the fans, because they really do nail the Peter Parker Spider-Man sort of dynamic. They just, again, they really did nail those movies there back in that time here. And Sam Raimi, I think, really did understand who the character is. It's this nerdy kind of science kid, and really did kind of, put a lot of love and passion into the movies here.
Okay, so. Well, in getting ready for Far From Home, I did watch Homecoming.
Me too.
Okay, and then of course I've seen Infinity Wars and Endgame and those things, which certainly feature him. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to be prepared and glad I'd never seen Homecoming. So that was a good
kind of primer, yeah.
Primer, yeah, because I wasn't familiar with the new MJ and the new characters that he's with.
Yeah,
new to me.
Well, so what's interesting is that the Marvel Cinematic Universe here, the MCU, is kind of like done this interesting juxtaposition where they haven't actually gone over how Peter Parker got his powers or any of the sort of Uncle Ben sort of related stuff here at all, which is interesting. I think if only just because I think they kind of all realize that, like, we all kind of know, everyone should kind of know who Peter Parker is on a certain level.
He picked a pack of pickle.
He did.
That's Peter Piper, so.
I think everyone kind of knows who Spider-Man is for the most part, which is why they were able to kind of enter in as the term that they call it is immediate res. You get right into the beginning. You get right past the chapter 1. You go right into chapter 2, essentially. So you already know who the character is. You kind of understand who he is. We're getting just refamiliarized for him from his first appearance in Captain America: Civil War. Of all the characters, I think he's the one that has the most continuity, because in a lot of cases here, a lot of his movies always play off his last 2 movies here have really played off the notion that everything that's happened to him prior to that affects him going into the movie. So if you watch Homecoming, you see that Spider-Man's adventures in Germany here as part of Captain America: Civil War really do play an effect on where Peter Parker goes to in the next movie. It kind of outlines really what he's doing and why he's doing it. And then obviously Infinity War and Endgame have played a major portion into him going into Far From Home. But before that, I just want to do a quick little primer on the Spider-Man person.
Okay.
So Spider-Man is Peter Parker. Peter Parker is the character. And he's originally a teenager who's a part of the science club and he's part of the journalism club, so he takes a lot of pictures and everything. He eventually works for the Daily Bugle. He got bitten by a radioactive spider. His superpowers are not necessarily shouldn't necessarily be unique to everybody. His major power is really his spider sense, and then I think in the movie they call it the Peter Tingle, which is kind of a funny little thing. But basically,
he doesn't like that term.
No, he doesn't. Basically, the spider sense is kind of like is basically his sixth sense. He can anything that he would recognize as danger, he would recognize through his spider sense, and allows him basically to realize something's coming that would be of danger to him. It's why in a lot of cases here he's able to kind of like dodge things, bullets, and kind of maneuver around stuff through his spider sense, essentially, because the spider sense is basically telling him this is coming, you need to move, and he would move accordingly for it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he also has increased strength, increased reflexes and agility, which is very clear in the way he moves. And that's one of the things I've really appreciated about the movies here is that they've really tried to nail the heroic poses of Spider-Man in a lot of cases, especially with the way his knees and arms are kind of moving around, where he's very kind of like hopping almost in some cases, or he's got...
The way he just kind of crouches and hangs.
Tom Holland, to his credit, though, actually used to be a gymnast.
Oh, that makes actually a lot of sense.
So a lot of the time when he's doing the moves, or when Spider-Man's doing the motions and everything, or any sort of move, it's actually Tom Holland doing that. Not a stunt actor. No, it's the actual kid doing it.
And he's really kind of more petite, and gymnasts frequently are.
Yes, and Spider-Man has been somewhat petite. I mean, depending on which version of Spider-Man you're reading, sometimes he's only like 5'4", 5'6" in height. In a lot of cases, he's not very tall.
Not very heroish. Although I guess Iron Man wasn't that tall.
Iron Man was in his like 5'10s.
That's not tall.
Captain America would have been like 6'2", 6'3".
That's tall.
Batman has always been described as being like 6'2", 6'4", give or take. Same thing with Superman. Wolverine, oddly enough. So Wolverine is one of the more interesting characters. When they got Hugh Jackman to do him back in the for the first X-Men movie, Hugh Jackman is like 6'2", 6'3" tall.
Yeah.
Wolverine, though, in the comics is 5'1".
Oh, that doesn't work at all.
No, but again, like Hugh Jackman just looks the part.
Oh,
and
he is. Yeah.
He is Wolverine for all extensive purposes. Yeah. So like,
I've not seen any of those movies.
I don't want to say you're missing anything, but it certainly does nail some of the aspects of the X-Men franchise. But we'll talk about more about that.
Okay.
All right. So
another day.
Another day. So Raymond's other powers here is he's got enhanced speed, so he kind of like can move a little bit faster, can see things a little bit quicker. So he has a little bit of a precognitive sort of ability, and his wall walking. He can stick onto walls and climb up walls, basically.
He can make webs.
That's actually not a superpower of his.
That's the web shooter?
So that's the web shooter. Originally, he creates that on his own. Now, the Sam Raimi version kind of just mixes it in with the rest of his backstory here. Like, he just has the ability to generate webs.
Well, because he was bit by a radioactive spider.
But if you think about it, where do spiders normally release thread from?
I don't... Oh, their butts.
Yes.
Okay. Well, that would be impolite.
It would be. Again, I like what they did in the Sam Raimi movies. They just kind of added it into the portion of his character that was like, oh yeah, and he can shoot webs. So you kind of didn't have to go through this monotony of how did this kid come up with this thread sort of thing that like has a lot of strength, tensile strength to it, but like kind of disappears quickly. It kind of dissolves
when he doesn't need it.
Yeah,
it's kind of a weird quality.
Yeah, like it's never well explained. I mean, in the comics, it's explained because he's a part of the science club that he eventually kind of accidentally figured it out, and created the web shooters as a result to be able to do it. In the movies, like, I mean, they tried to do it with the Andrew Garfield Amazing Spider-Man movies. I think in the Marvel continuity here, they're just like, you know what? It's Spider-Man. Everyone kind of knows what Spider-Man is. Like, it's Spider-Man.
It doesn't need explanation.
Yeah. And Marvel's been
it's just a given.
Yeah, Marvel's been really good about deciding what needs to be explained and what doesn't need to be explained.
They changed things up, though. Okay, so I remember Spider-Man the funny papers. Okay, so back in the day, of course, you had comic strips that were both daily, and then on Sundays were the big color pullout because the dailies were black and white.
Yep.
And he was a comic strip character, and so I remember him with Aunt May and Uncle Ben. Yeah,
any number of different villains.
Yeah, and any number of different villains. But it was a very different look and feel
To what later iterations are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine that's going to happen with time. I mean, one of the nice things about what's interesting about comics is that every few years they change up the writers and they change up the artists who do comics in order to keep it fresh and interesting. And as a result of doing that, you get new storylines, you get new takes on stuff here. Famously, there was a guy who did Iron Man, who actually went through the portion of actually making the Iron Man armor look like armor, and not just a guy with like a skin tight kind of bodysuit that looked like Iron Man. Like this one actually looked like armor pieces. It kind of really did set the tone for what Iron Man would look like in the movies. Yeah, so
because I like that Iron Man actually has a suit that you can tell is a suit.
Yeah, and they actually in that first movie they made a practical model of it. So there was a very much of practical like armor and everything that suit that he could actually wear if he wanted to, and that the stunt actor wore as well, which I think was very cool. One thing you do need to know about Spider-Man here is that he is what they kind of have coined a tragic character. In the sense that in a lot of cases when it comes to Spider-Man stories, it's all about either putting Peter Parker or Spider-Man into a very complicated sort of scenario or disadvantage here, and watching his life just kind of get tortured around him. He does have moments of happiness, but a lot of the time, those moments of happiness come like huge moments of tragedy in a lot of cases. Again, like the best example here being, he got these powers. He wanted to like use them for his own benefit to try to get a car so he can impress a girlfriend. He lets a robber go, thinking, well, it's not my job to stop a robber. I'm just a guy. And that robber ends up killing Uncle Ben. So even with just a little bit of high, he gets the lowest of lows. So
he never gets to be really happy.
He doesn't really get to be happy all that often.
But and aside from Iron Man, who seems to be the one exception, do any of them really get to be happy? Because if you look at like Superman, never gets Lois Lane.
He does actually.
In the second movie, he does.
In the second movie, he does, and then later, in the comics, yeah.
You know, and you never see Batman with a full-time girl.
Yeah, but Batman's reason is because he knows that if he gets a girlfriend or he gets a wife, that he can't continue to lead the life that he's been leading thus far, which is a testament to his parents' legacy and memory, essentially, to him. That a person shot his parents, and it's kind of his testament here to avenge his parents and protect the city that nobody else is protecting. So, some characters are built in with it, and some characters put it upon themselves too. So,
it just seems like none of them really get to have. Yeah, unless you're in Incredibles.
True.
You don't get to have a full life.
No, I mean, like even Iron Man to a certain extent here. He was probably the exception.
He gets Pepper Potts.
He gets Pepper Potts, absolutely, and then Captain America is somewhat of the same, but Captain America is also just like a guy who doesn't know how to not turn off.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, it seems sort of inherent into the hero character that you don't get
to be happy. But again, keep in mind that Peter Parker in a lot of cases is actively trying to be happy.
He is. So we can talk about it in the last movie, which was Homecoming.
Mm-hmm.
He makes the decision to be the friendly local
Spider-Man instead of being like this international sort of Avenger kind of guy.
He's supposed to be the next one, and instead he opts to be the friendly local Spider-Man.
Yep.
And just deal with his neighborhood.
So that's probably a good tangent here to get into the movie here. Far From Home, we have a lot of different cool characters that kind of come up, and this is the first movie to really talk about what everyone's calling, I guess, the blip.
Yes, they're back after 5 years.
So everyone got blipped away from the basically Infinity War, and we're seeing the aftermath of it. And one of the aftermath is that like people who like just suddenly disappeared reappeared in the exact same spot. So like the example they used was like this band was playing in the gym, and then the next thing you know, they're playing a basketball game, and suddenly the gym just reappears with all these band people that just disappeared before then.
Exactly where they were standing before.
A lot of people are also displaced because of this blip, because in Aunt May's case here, like she disappeared when she was in her apartment, and then a new family came in and took over the apartment, and as a result here, like she just suddenly appeared in the apartment, and everyone was like, "Who the hell are you?" So I would imagine, I would hope that another movie here kind of does give some impression of this time progressing here. I'm really interested. I don't know how they'll do it necessarily, but I would like to see. It's one of those nice things again that Spider-Man is one of those movies that just carries the continuity with them full steam, versus like if you look at like Black Panther as an example here, like the continuity really didn't affect him too much, except that his father died, but that was just leading into his own story to begin with anyways. As for Spider-Man, like the entire world changing around him really does affect him.
Well, and the interesting thing, I mean, they talk about it in a number of different ways. They deal with it. There's the high school has a daily morning broadcast, like a newscast, and the newscasters deal with it and they talk about if you got blipped, you had to start your senior year all over again, because when you got blipped, you came back, you hadn't aged at all, and your friends had moved on. And so it dealt with it with you, suddenly half your friends were 5 years older than you and had moved on with their lives and completed college, and you were having to go back and finish high school. And in one place, it actually very humorously deals with it with one of the friends tries to order a drink on the plane, and the other one leans over to the stewardess and says, he got blipped, he's not really 21. And or over 21. And so it had cute sort of ramifications that, you know, like then what does happen? You have an ID that says that you were born 20-something years ago.
But you're not really 21, you're still 16.
Exactly. So it dealt with it in some humorous ways too, but it did deal with the idea that people's houses,
lives, their entire continuities have really
changed. Their jobs, everything. Yeah. And when they came back, it wasn't like you could slide right back into where you'd been.
It's kind of interesting that I'm wondering here that how much Marvel will play with this notion here of having this 5-year sort of gap, especially with kind of more long-lasting characters they have. So like Black Panther, Doctor Strange, you know, the Hulk. Like how, like will they continue to have like these little bits where like, especially with the people who did disappear again, like Black Panther, the Avengers, Doctor Strange here, like how will their worlds change because they've been gone for 5 years? And especially in the case of people like Wakanda here, like Wakanda has been existing for 5 years without its leader, who was leading in the interim.
And does that person step aside to let
the original one back in?
Yeah.
You know? So do you have like another civil war, which probably not the direction they were going to go? Does T'Challa see the world changed by his intent? Do they continue to do his intent, which is like Wakanda integrates with the rest of the world here again? And like, does that get stopped because of the blip, or does that continue onward? And if it did, like, did it happen the way he wanted it to? Like, again, like, so many questions, so much fun.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So it was interesting. It dealt with it just peripherally.
Yeah, primarily, yeah. But I think you almost have to, just because the way the movie is. If you spent too long on it in the movie, you would almost feel like you were dragging this element out.
Yeah, and you didn't want to do that. So I thought it dealt with it well.
Yes.
I thought it dealt with it well and kept it lighthearted, but
was still very much a part of the world building.
Yeah.
And again,
Yeah.
Marvel does this really well, where it pulls all the world building, is not intentionally sort of like in your face at all about it or exposition-y.
Mm-hmm.
They very much are just kind of weaving it in through the rest of the world. Like, this kind of happens here and here and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So essentially the movie takes place, it's about 5 years after the blip, and so Peter Parker is still 16 years old, and he's going on a science vacation with people from his school.
They're going to Europe, but science topic.
For science topics, yes. Peter Parker's got this entire deal where he wants to get MJ to the top of the Eiffel Tower and give her a necklace and like just basically come out to her and saying like, "Hey, I like you."
Yeah, so he's bought a Black Dahlia necklace that is special to some city in Italy that they went to.
Well, they went to Venice and he got it there because she's always into like these weird kind of esoteric topics.
Yeah.
And one of the topics was like the Black Dahlia murder.
Yeah.
So that's why he wanted to give it to her, because she would get the symbolism for it.
Yeah.
Along the way, though, Nick Fury's trying to get a hold of Peter Parker, and Peter Parker's basically just kind of ignoring him.
Right.
Come to find out that while they're in Venice here, like there's a water monster that kind of appears.
Well, it actually opens prior to this with a cyclone that happens in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
So the first scene we see is actually the cyclone that happens in Mexico, where the dust actually has a face.
Yes.
People see the face,
mm-hmm.
and it just wipes out this city, and everybody's trying to reason with people say it had a face, but it was just a cyclone,
yeah.
And that's what did the damage. So that's the precursor to what's going to happen in Venice.
Absolutely, and then you get Nick Fury and Maria Hill are traveling there and find this guy in a green suit, who we'll just call him Mysterio because that's who he is.
He gets named during the movie.
Basically, this water elemental sort of monster creature. They get him onto land, and eventually Mysterio's able to kind of destroy him, I guess. With Peter Parker trying to just do... Peter Parker just wants to put Spider-Man behind him and just enjoy his vacation, be a kid.
He didn't pack his suit. Aunt May packed it for him.
Yes. So...
he didn't want to be Spider-Man.
He did not want to be Spider-Man on the trip, and Nick Fury basically just kind of like gets him into being Spider-Man for the trip. Basically hijacks the trip here essentially so that he can do it.
Yeah, they're supposed to be going to Paris next, and
mm-hmm.
they end up going to Prague.
Yes, they end up going to Prague, where there's supposed to be this fire monster elemental, and so.
So, but let's back up a little bit. So the water monster that Mysterio deals with,
mm-hmm.
and Mysterio is this new
guy from a different dimension.
And we're told that there are actually 5 or 6 universes.
There's actually infinite number of multiverses, which is a concept in Marvel that basically allows them to have alternate kind of storylines here. Like, even the Marvel Cinematic Universe is happening in an alternate universe from the original Marvel continuity. And as a side note here, when they're all kind of talking together here, essentially, when Nick Fury basically, like, drugs... It's that nice fun scene where Nick Fury's just kind of sitting down in the hotel room and just kind of like shoots Ned in the
neck with the dart.
And then, mind you, other people start coming to the door, and he's basically like, "Look, somebody else knocks on that door. I'm going to have to kill somebody."
Yeah.
So
the teacher comes and knocks on
the girlfriend knocks on the door. Everyone just kind of comes and knocks on the door. So essentially, Mysterio makes a point of saying that, like, yeah, there are infinite multiverses and different stuff happening, which is a concept initially talked about in Doctor Strange, that there's infinite multiverses out there. Well, different realities and stuff that happens.
So Mysterio introduces the idea that in another universe on planet Earth,
mm-hmm.
these elemental monsters destroyed Earth.
Yes.
And that they gather power each time. So the elemental monster that you see in Venice, again, is made of water, mm-hmm. has a very definite face.
Yes.
And you actually see it.
He's got like arms as well.
Yeah.
Very much looks like a dude who was made out of water.
Yeah. So and Mysterio says the elements are wind and water and fire.
Mm-hmm.
Fire will probably show up next.
is somewhat the most dangerous.
It's so and you've got to keep it away from any electricity, any power,
or any metal.
Any
it
metal,
absorbs metal, and
it'll
that's how it
absorb
gets
metal.
more power.
Yeah, and so he introduces that fire will be next, and sure enough, they go to.
That's what happens in Prague.
Yeah.
Yep. So they get to Prague, and now Nick Fury's given Spider-Man a all black kind of like tactical kind of looking costume, because his big deal was like, I don't want anybody to realize that
this is Spider-Man.
I'm Spider-Man, because Spider-Man's supposed to be in New York right now,
yeah.
and if I'm here as Spider-Man, people are going to recognize me as. People are going to put two and two together and realize that they're going to figure it out that somebody on this class trip is Spider-Man.
Yeah.
So he gets a tactical suit. He ends up stopping the fire monster here.
They work together, and they kind of coordinated to do it.
And Mysterio's taken on this kind of interesting perspective here. So Peter Parker is kind of somewhat like desperately looking for a father figure, almost. Like he's what he originally saw in Iron Man here, Tony Stark. He saw like a father figure who, and very much Tony Stark, not intentionally, but very much treated him like a kid of his own.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a fun and interesting sort of thing here, because again, like you wouldn't think that like Tony Stark would really kind of take on a kid at all like that.
And do we need to back up at all and talk about the glasses?
So the glasses gets given to him by Nick Fury, and it's got an AI that's not necessarily specially designed for Peter Parker, but more or less kind of just a all-purpose sort of like, this is a gift from Tony Stark that he wanted you to have if he should ever pass away.
And you get to choose.
Well, not even so much he gets to choose, but so much that he was given this gift here from Tony Stark, saying that like not necessarily saying that he'll be the next Iron Man, but saying like you'll know how to use this, or you'll be the one to choose how to use this.
Yeah.
And Mysterio here is very much a I don't know if it's intentional or not. He's trying to be a father figure to Peter Parker, like kind of apologizing for all this shit going down and like trying to befriend him on a certain level as he sees the benefit of him. They defeat the fire monster here, and then the two of them are kind of like having a drink, and he's very much like Peter Parker is very much the opinion of like, you know what? No, you, Mysterio, you're a soldier. You know all the stuff here. You'd be the better guy to be Iron Man. Everyone is expecting me to be Iron Man. I can't
be the next.
Be
the next leader. Yeah,
I can't be the next Iron Man. But you seem like you'd be the guy to do that. So he gives him the glasses. He leaves to go see MJ, and then it's quickly shown that Mysterio is not quite playing honestly.
He did not come from another universe.
No.
He did not come from another time. He is completely a fraud.
Absolutely.
And
a charlatan of the best nature.
He is, and so he's completely a fraud. And as it turns out, he's a disgruntled former Tony Stark employee.
Which is kind of interesting. So they get like a number of people there from past movies to be to reprise their characters. So he's apparently the one that came up with the holographic technology in Captain America: Civil War. There's another guy who created the drones from the very first Iron Man, who was actually a producer for the film.
Oh, really?
Yeah, okay. He was a producer on the first Iron Man movie. So he reprised his role in that particular sense. And the other characters have, I guess, been former Tony Stark employees, and all this was intentionally a ruse to make it so that like they could make Mysterio this new hero that would be, the savior of everybody,
who would replace Iron Man, basically in people's minds. Mysterio,
and then use that to whatever benefit I think he would use for it. Because that's the part that's somewhat dubious for me. Like, what benefit would there be to being the new Iron Man? Like I can appreciate that like a hero would like be desired at the end of the day, but like but I mean, like even if you just kind of heard what Iron Man had to go through to be the hero, like
why would you want to do that?
Why would you want to do that except for either a monetary sort of game or a power sort of game? And what's worse is that like Mysterio doesn't have any sort of physical powers. It's just technology in holograms and drones. I mean, like, and apparently there's a lot of work going into just making these holographic projections and everything.
Okay, so the deal is that, as it turns out, the elemental monsters aren't monsters at all. They are the drones projecting this holographic technology, and so they can move. They're choreographed, and because Mysterio knows what they're going to do next, he knows how to respond to them. He also knew how to set Peter Parker up to respond to them, because Peter Parker did as Mysterio suggested in different parts when they were in Prague. So now you have Mysterio, who is created these monsters, and he wants to create now an event that is superhero worthy, as if these other ones weren't. But he actually terms it a
Avengers level
threat.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, he really is just out for the power gain here. Interesting side note here. Spider-Man has dealt with a lot of semi-elemental based supervillains in the past. And so all the elementals here are based off of former actual, like, Spider-Man villains. So one of them being Hydra Man, Molten Man, Sandman, and Cyclone. So all the elementals were based off of former Spider-Man villains, which is definitely a very cool nod.
Yeah, that is a cool nod.
Yeah. So Spider-Man figures this out and decides he's got to go to, I guess, he's got to go somewhere to go basically get to Nick Fury, to explain to Nick Fury this is all what's gone down. He gets to, I guess, some sort of abandoned warehouse. He gets to, like, what he thinks initially is a covert sort of area. Kind of find out it's just an abandoned warehouse, and Mysterio just screws with him with all these projectors.
He runs them through this holographic world that's constantly changing, where nothing's real. Like if you were going to really go crazy.
Yeah. And, like, Spider-Man goes through different costume changes. The world around him literally changes back and forth. Like, this is kind of like what Mysterio would be like if he were a supervillain, just taunting you and teasing you with not letting you realize what's what. And Spider-Man, you know, to his credit, like, just does not get it at all.
Well, and he's got to get through to Nick Fury what's going on.
And even in the middle of it here, like, he finally, like at a certain point here, like, he continues to keep tricking Spider-Man into thinking what's happening versus not happening. At the very end, he ends up getting hit by a bullet train that takes him all the way to the Netherlands.
And in this moment, Mysterio thinks he's dead.
Yeah.
But at one point, he's tricked into thinking he's talking to Nick Fury, and he reveals who else knows he's Spider-Man.
Well, not even so much as knows that Spider-Man, but so much knows that of this projector technology. So MJ has actually found some of this technology that was, like, somehow pulled off of one of the robots here, or the drones.
Yeah.
This is also where MJ kind of, tells
they're
Peter,
walking around after the event in Prague.
Yeah, and she's like, yeah, you're Spider-Man, aren't you? Like, Peter's like, no. It's kind of obvious.
Yeah.
To anybody who's looking. And so it's this moment where Peter Parker's, like, trying to, like, gauge whether, like, wants to tell Mary Jane that he likes her.
Yeah. He gives her the broken necklace.
Yes. And then you get to the Netherlands here, and Peter Parker is in the Netherlands while
he is in jail with a bunch of
soccer hooligans.
Drunk soccer hooligans.
Yes, but they're all very nice in the Netherlands.
They're very nice. They give him a shirt because he looked cold.
Yes.
So they give him a shirt.
Apparently the guard's around the corner. Apparently he's going to have a baby. So they're like, oh, yeah, no, the guard will be back later. He gets out of jail and he, like, walks around.
He just literally breaks the lock on the door.
He just kind of pulls it off.
Yeah. And the other guys go stay in the cell.
Yeah, and they're just like, oh, all right.
And he asks some random guy at a market to borrow his phone.
And the guy's like, yeah, sure, go for it.
And he places a call.
He places a call to Happy Hogan.
Yeah.
Now, mind you, Happy Hogan in the comics is like Tony Stark's bodyguard before he was Iron Man. And he was, again, Jon Favreau was the original director for the first Iron Man as well.
I love Happy.
Happy's also got a thing for Aunt May too.
Okay, so back in this way up, when did Aunt May get hot?
During Civil War. Again, keep in mind, like, this is still not the traditional version of Peter Parker that we used to.
Well, or MJ.
Or MJ, or like any of the other characters for this part. I mean, Ned's not a character that existed in the Spider-Man continuity at all.
I like Ned. He reminds me of in Doogie Howser, MD.
Yes.
Doogie's friend.
I could see that. So again, like, but everything's not the necessarily traditional version of it here. I mean, like, I think what Marvel realized was that everyone's seen Peter Parker a bunch of times. How do we do it differently to make it interesting? And I think this is a better way to do it.
Yeah.
It's still very much keep him as a teenager instead of like a young college student like he was in the Sam Raimi movies.
Mm-hmm.
To kind of still play up that innocence and fun with him. But at the same time, I mean, I think if you're going to continue to play up that he's kind of a teenager, that Aunt May can be a little bit different too. And that's one of the things I do appreciate here is that like they found something to do with Marissa Tomei. They found something to do with her.
Well, and she's marvelous as Aunt May, and it gives it a whole different feel. And the reality, because she can be kind of hip and she can be realistic and she can have those conversations with him, and she can know that he's Spider-Man, because the original Aunt May really did she?
Didn't really know that it was Spider-Man, but kind of had the notion of like, yeah, I bet you're this, but if you're not going to tell me, then I'm okay with it. At the end of the day, it's not the end of my world.
Whereas Aunt May is really, kind of into it and gets it, and I think it's a cool sort of way that she can have conversations with him.
That she can interact with the story as well.
Yeah.
That she doesn't. She's
not peripheral.
She's not very great use of that word. Very, very excellent. So, Spider-Man calls Happy Hogan, and they arrive in like a Stark plane, and he has this lovely little moment here with Hogan. He's like, "Look, everyone thinks I'm going to be the next Iron Man, and I don't know how I can live up to that. I can't live up to that. There's no way I can live
Obviously,
up to
I did wrong. I gave the glasses to the wrong
I've screwed
person.
I shouldn't be this guy." And Hogan basically goes to the point of saying, like, "Yeah, Tony messed up a lot too, but you don't have to be the next Iron Man. You're the current Spider-Man.
Yeah. You
don't have to live up to Tony's legacy. You just have to act in its stead."
And he tells him, Tony did screw up, but he knew people and he chose you.
Yeah. Which again speaks a lot to their relationship, really. That
I love Happy in those moments. I mean, he's
the perfect parental figure that you would want.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Go make your suit.
And and he basically was like, "Yeah, go make your suit. I'll take care of the flying." And it's like there's this lovely moment where where Peter Parker's messing around with like the holographic technology, very much in the same way that Iron Man did in the first movie. He's like, "Yeah, you may not think you're going to be the next Iron Man. You're going to be the next Iron Man."
Yeah.
So big final scene here is big final fight here is basically Mysterio's kind of hanging out on one of the London bridges, and he's using his holographic technology.
And he's stranded. He's stranded all of Spider-Man's, Peter Parker's high school group on a double-decker bus in the middle of the bridge.
Yes. So they can
intentionally.
Intentionally, so they can be killed, so that way they won't share the secret of the holographic stuff there. But also at the same time, Nick Fury and Maria Hill are there as well, with the intention of killing them at the same time, so that way they don't have to know more than they need to. And so Peter Parker arrives in a new spider outfit, realizes that it's a hologram, so it gets inside and starts messing with all the drones to destroy the projection. Mysterio eventually figures it out, decides, you know what, screw the projection, we'll just have the drones here. and we'll figure it out later in post. We'll figure out how to explain it away.
So while the monster is at the bridge, it actually starts disappearing, and all you see are the drones flying. Parts of it almost flake away.
Yeah.
As they sort of get uncloaked. Is that
well, because they're getting destroyed, they're not projecting the scenery, the holographic scenery around them. So because they can't project the holographic scenery, they just kind of it's kind of like a puzzle piece. So puzzle pieces are missing. You have a part of the picture, and you kind of can tell what the picture is, but you don't have all the picture. So
whole portions of it kind of flake away. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and so eventually he just decides to let loose with all the drones to go after Spider-Man. Spider-Man just basically plays around with this bridge, just destroying these things left and right. At the end of it here, Peter Parker, he was on the bridge the entire time, in one of the hallways above the bridge. Mysterio was. And Peter Parker eventually gets to him, takes back the glasses, and presumably he dies.
It looks like he dies.
He looks like he dies, and again, I mean, Peter Parker even asked the AI, hey, is this real? Is there are no holographic projections going on, or there's no projections going on. And it's okay, well, he must be dead then. He goes back downstairs. He goes back to the bridge, and there he meets MJ. Who this entire crew of people here got trapped, I guess, in the London vaults, Crown Jewel vaults.
They are in the Crown Jewels because Happy knows they just got 6-foot walls.
Yes, so very thick walls. So if the drones have to get to him, it'll take a while to get to him in there.
And the drones do try to get to them.
And then they get very close.
Yes.
MJ basically tells Peter Parker, I wasn't just looking at you because I thought you were Spider-Man. I liked you as well.
Yeah.
So they have this nice romantic kiss, and he gets the girl at the end. The final scenes are him talking to Aunt May and Happy Hogan about their relationship, and
he flies home, and Aunt May picks him up. And,
Aunt May says it's apparently a summer fling. Hogan thinks it might be more.
Yeah, so they've been dating.
Yes.
Aunt May and Happy. That makes me happy.
Yeah, nice to see Aunt May be happy, and Hogan be happy too.
Yeah.
And then the last bit of the movie here is Spider-Man with Mary Jane, MJ swinging through New York, and MJ apparently terrified the entire time.
Yeah, she tells him at the end of that, because he goes on a date with her, and on the date is him swinging her around, dressed as Spider-Man.
Oh, well, obviously.
Yeah.
And basically she's never again.
Never again. But then in the post-credits...
So the first post-credit that we get here. Now, what's interesting about this first post-credit scene is that J. Jonah Jameson is reprised by J.K. Simmons, which is the first time a character from a non-MCU movie has reprised a character. But at the end of the day here, nobody was going to be this character other than J.K. Simmons. This J.K. Simmons nails J. Jonah Jameson perfectly. He just gets the character. He totally is the character. And basically what ends up happening, and the other way they've also done this here as well, they've redone the Daily Bugle, not as a newspaper anymore, but more of a Alex Jones InfoWars style, internet sort of, thing. Which, on a certain level, makes...
Politico. Kind
of like Politico, like a CNN almost thing.
Yeah.
But very much in the vein and look of InfoWars primarily.
Yeah.
And basically he comes out with the notion here that Mysterio was a hero. Spider-Man killed Mysterio.
And there's video footage.
And there's video footage of all this. And at the very end of it, Mysterio blurts out the fact that Spider-Man is Peter Parker and gives away his identity. And so that's the end of the movie for all extensive purposes.
And you can see that it's badly it's forced edited.
Yeah, very forced edited. The elements with Mysterio here, which gives me the impression that Mysterio is actually not dead at all. So there's one thing you have to know is that Mysterio in the comic books is always a bad guy. So as much as the Spider-Man movie wasn't leaning on the notion of Mysterio being a bad guy, if you would know Spider-Man even tangentially comic book wise, you might have known that Mysterio was a bad guy.
Well, I mean, so a couple of things. Right before Mysterio dies on the bridge, he does tell him, "This isn't over," and
so that's another thing, because there is a collection of bad guys known as the Sinister Six, which is a collection of various Spider-Man villains that always kind of changes in and out over time. And so what would be interesting is that if after a couple movies here that they form up this group in order to get back at Spider-Man. Because remember, the Vulture is still alive. And if Jake Gyllenhaal's character Mysterio is still alive, there's basically a wealth of different opportunities here. And what I really hope that they continue to keep doing this is that they keep that all these villains are relying on Stark Tech stuff. Because I think that'd be a great through line that Spider-Man's dealing with all of Tony Stark's mistakes on a certain way, or past failures.
Oh, so the sins of the father are visited upon the son. Not actually his father, but kind of his father.
That's actually a great way of explaining it. I hadn't thought of it that way before. But yeah, because again, if you look back to the Vulture is basically all this tech from when the Avengers were in within New York during the invasion. And then you have Mysterio, which is basically Peter Parker, basically dealing with former Tony Stark employees. So I'm hopeful that any new kind of stuff that comes out of this is going to be slightly related to Stark Tech or stuff related to that. Because I think it'd be a great through line that, like, as much as Tony Stark is gone, the world that he impacted still exists on a macro level. Not on a micro level, but a macro level throughout the world.
Well, and part of what feeds that whole thought was I thought it was interesting that they showed tributes to Iron Man in various parts of Europe as they were traveling through Europe.
Yeah,
you saw
kind of little
huge wall murals, and you saw statues, and you saw things that were tributes to Iron Man.
Well, even in the very beginning, you see a tribute to the fallen Avengers here. So, like, it's presumed. So it's very much stated that, like, Captain America is gone, Vision is gone, Iron Man is gone, Black Widow is gone. Like, all these characters are just basically, for the most part dead. Although we kind of know that
they died in Endgame.
Yeah, they died in Endgame and in Infinity War, respectively, for Vision. But like the notion that these heroes are gone, especially Captain America, which is not really gone, but like.
He's an old man.
Yeah, but I mean, like, they know how to do time travel now. That's not to say that, Chris Evans can't pop back in for some purpose at some point here. So that's the end of the next movie here, which is really kind of interesting to see where they go from there.
Well, there's obviously something else coming because you got to. Poor Spider-Man, as you said, is always
a tragedy. Yeah,
and that's his tragedy because he's just making.
He's finally found some sort of level of happiness here. He's gotten to some sort of equilibrium status, and then his entire world changes with J. Jonah Jameson, which. Again, the second I saw that in the theaters, I was just like, my mind was just like blown away. It's like, oh, they did it. Well, they not only brought back the characters. I was curious how they were going to bring back the Daily Bugle, but they brought back J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson, which was just perfect. Well, it really was.
Yeah, and I thought it's he is now plagued with the idea that everybody knows his name.
Well, not that everyone knows his name, but that he is actually a villain and not a superhero.
Yeah.
Which is how, again, the Daily Bugle really does paint him in the comics and in the early Sam Raimi movies. That Spider-Man is a menace, not is a bad guy.
He's a threat. He's a
So,
threat. He's a vigilante at best.
Precisely, and then you get the very ending tail scene. If you watched all the way to the very end of the credits here, which again Marvel movies have kind of trained us to do here now.
You're standing in the movie theater all by yourself.
Yeah, you just
there were very few other people there.
Oh no, my movie theater had everyone just kind of waiting around. I don't think anybody got up because everyone kind of knew what was coming.
We went to an early showing.
That's fair. So you get the second post-trailer stuff here. So it's the very ending thing here. And you get Nick Fury and Maria Hill are driving around, and they warp, I guess, is the best. They change their skin, and it's revealed that these are the Skrulls from Captain Marvel, posing as Nick Fury and Maria Hill. So it's I can't remember the guy's name here, but it's the main Skrull, and then his wife or his spouse. And what's interesting here is that they go about saying is like, well, how was I supposed to know? You know, like, I'm a shapeshifter. I should have seen that was a fake. And it makes it all paint in reality when you think about it, because like why would Nick Fury be really interested in a 16-year-old boy to be the one to be the hero here? Why would he not actually get other Avengers in on it if this is especially something unique that would be, that would be out there? And he would know what Avengers to call on for stuff like this. But the fact that they don't even call other Avengers at all or anything like that, again, really does paint this.
That's an interesting thought, because I didn't even think of it that way.
Yeah, because when you think about it here, like, okay, there's these elemental sort of creatures here, and Spider-Man's power sets don't really lead him to being useful in a lot of these cases here at all. I mean, like, again, Peter Parker's more of a physical sort of dude at the end of the day.
Local-friendly Spider-Man.
Well, again, like, some superheroes are more projectile-based, some are more mystical-based, and others are more physical-based. If you take, like, Iron Man as a more projectile-based superhero, then you have, like, Captain America as more of a physical type here. Like, in a lot of cases here, like, Spider-Man would be in the physical sort of realm here, if you think about it, because the way he mostly interacts with people is by punching them and kicking them and moving around.
Yeah.
And even, like, a lot of his abilities wouldn't really do anything against fire or water at all. So, but then you get to see Nick Fury, and I guess the Skrulls are talking to Nick Fury, and Nick Fury is on a spaceship, just kind of hanging out almost with a bunch of other Skrulls, and I'm assuming this has something to do with whatever.
Well, he says at one time, he when somebody mentions Captain Marvel, he says, "Don't mention that name around me."
Yeah.
Why is that?
I think he holds her in such high respect that, like, you really don't bring that name up. But again, I mean, like, it could be the Skrulls, like, intentionally being like, no, you don't get to mention that person.
Okay. I wonder what that was about, because it seemed odd. So.
But yeah, no. So again, like, Nick Fury is on a ship, apparently leading some sort of crew, and it's not like a small ship either. It looks like a really big ship.
No Flurkins, though.
Not that we saw initially. They could very well be there.
Where's Goose? I want my Goose.
That's an interesting question where Goose is. Maybe Captain Marvel came back for Goose, or Goose wandered off and continued to just be a part of the world again, hidden around. Interesting nonetheless. Again, I'm very curious to see where Nick Fury is now. But this also does give Nick Fury the ability to not have to be in every movie anymore. I have an idea what's going to happen to Nick Fury. I kind of don't want it to happen just because I love Samuel L. Jackson, but I kind of have an idea of what's going to happen to him. So do you remember Guardians of the Galaxy 2?
Yes.
Now, do you remember Stan Lee's cameo in that? Also, the first movie, Spider-Man Far From Home, without a Stan Lee cameo in it.
Yeah, I noticed that, actually, because Homecoming does have a cameo. He's in the window. Yeah, sad.
In the Guardians of the Galaxy movie here, you see Stan Lee as an astronaut, kind of talking with a bunch of other bald guys that are kind of like glowing eyes. Mm-hmm. These characters are known as the Watchers. They're basically a group of, like, alien race that basically watches over the galaxy to make sure that it doesn't get destroyed. And they very rarely ever step in unless the impression is that without their assistance, the heroes are not going to be able to save their own galaxy and the universe will be wiped out.
Well, then why did he let Infinity Wars happen?
I guess, again, they have the ability to kind of see into the future and see what'll happen. Even though they're known as the Watchers, they know what that. Again, I mean, like, even if Thanos does happen and they never fix what Thanos did, like, you still have half the galaxy. I mean, like, it's less, but it's still there.
Okay, fair enough.
So, there's a storyline here that happens where Nick Fury in the original comic books here apparently steals the eyes of a Watcher and puts them in his own body, so that way it basically takes it in on himself, so that way he can perceive all the eventual threats that'll happen to the Marvel universe, and they can help stop this from ever happening. Eventually, though, like, it's found out that he's the one who did it, and as this crime for killing a Watcher and stealing the eyes of a Watcher, he becomes kind of a Watcher himself, but he can't actually interact with the world around him. He
knows, but he can't speak.
He's the silent, I believe, if memory serves me correctly. And so what ends up happening is that he just basically becomes a silent Watcher over the universe, and his punishment here is that he can only watch what's happening. He can't actually interact with anybody. He can't tell anybody what's going to happen. And nobody can really see him, but he can just watch what's going to happen.
That would be horrible.
It would. Especially for a person like Nick Fury, who very much, especially in the comics, has always had his pulse on everything that's happening and how to help coordinate the superheroes to fight off against the stuff that's happening through S.H.I.E.L.D. or through any other means that might exist. So, I think that's an eventuality that might come for Samuel L. Jackson if they want to kind of write out the character, but Samuel L. Jackson's also just had a lot of fun, I think, just having, like, an occasional,
Well, he doesn't have to do much. Like he wasn't
in a lot of the stuff here, but again, like, you did have to ferry him around from location to location to location.
Yeah.
And Samuel L. Jackson, to have him participate in a lot of this is expensive. It would be somewhat expensive as well, considering that he's a pivotal character here, too. I mean, part of the reason for writing off some of the Avengers here, like Tony Stark or Tony Stark, Captain America, Wanda. Some of the reason for writing off these characters is that these characters are now, can command a lot of money.
Yeah.
Chris Evans, I mean, though, has made a point of saying that he wants to do less acting roles. He wants to do more directorial stuff because he found a liking for that.
Yeah.
And then the other version here, though, is that Robert Downey Jr. just can demand a lot of money to just reprise a role.
Well, plus I would imagine that at some point, sort of like Sean Connery, you want to move on with your career. You've done enough 007.
Yeah, you don't need to do this character anymore. And it's not to say that there won't be a way to bring back these characters, in another 10, 15 years maybe, or find a way to reintroduce them in a different way.
Well, I like the idea that even though Iron Man is gone, he's very much a part of this movie.
And again, that's my hope as well, is that, again, like, future Spider-Man stuff is all still based around Tony Stark's in creation somehow wrecking with Spider-Man. Because a lot of Spider-Man's villains are all tech-based. So I would love to see another version of as much as I don't want to see it, I want to see another version of Dr. Octopus. I do want to see a Goblin at some point here, whether it's the Green Goblin or the Hobgoblin. I want to see one of those. I would love to see the Rhino done actually well for once.
Okay. So where does all this fit with the announcement at Comic-Con for Phase 4?
All right, so Phase 4. So we'll go ahead and get into that stuff here. So, basically at Comic-Con this year, Marvel was the big name that actually had all the announcements. Nobody else really wanted to do a lot of the announcements because they knew Marvel was just coming off of Endgame earlier in the year, and basically knew that, like, they were going to take a victory lap. Sometimes movie studios will do that. They'll release, if they have to release a movie on a weekend, they'll try to do it not around the other major movies, because the major movies will, so you don't have to fight against it, because they know, like, if people have the option to go see, like, James Bond or the Avengers, they might go see the Avengers more than they would see James Bond.
Yeah.
And at the same time, they want to maximize their gross that they're going to get. So you're going to make your most money in the first week of the movie coming out. Maybe the second week as well, if it's a big movie. So you might push James Bond to a later month, so that way you're not fighting with, the Marvel movies. Because the Marvel movies are always going to be big money makers in a lot of cases.
Right, they're going to be box office stars.
Alright, so new stuff that they kind of announced here was going to be the Eternals. Now, these are apparently a group of immortal beings that have existed on Earth for a long time. A lot of them might be heroic heroes in some cases, like Gilgamesh, Icarus. This is straight out of Jack Kirby territory, which means that it's going to be weird. Keep in mind that Jack Kirby's the guy that came up with, like, a lot of the weird Pantheon sort of stuff here, like that Guardians of the Galaxy kind of deals with.
Mm-hmm.
So if anything, this will be fun, weird, hopefully. Again, this is one of those things I'm really excited that Marvel is going to try to make new IPs and new storylines.
Okay.
Because because right now they've been riding high on the basic Marvel continuity of the last 60, 70 years, and so it'll be nice to see them trying new stuff. Beyond that, we're going to have like 2 or 3 different things coming to Disney's new streaming service, which so we're going to have the Falcon and Winter Soldier, which will be interesting. I think this is really going to be the Falcon learning to use the shield and becoming Captain America eventually, or at least the Falcon Captain America that he is in the comics right now.
Mm-hmm.
So that'll be interesting. Because I do find their interaction is different without Chris Evans, Captain America there. That these two are not necessarily friends, but they're more or less sort of friends of a friend. So it'll be interesting to kind of see where...
you can be respectful acquaintances.
Yeah, but even then they were kind of like... again, they were kind of like... how do I best describe it? Because the best interaction you see with them during Captain America Civil War kind of basically paints how they'll interact with each other, where they're not necessarily trustful of each other, but they're kind of like, okay, I got to work with you, so I'll work with you, sort of,
Okay.
in sort of thing here. And so with Winter Soldier kind of, I want to say begrudgingly giving allowing Captain America to pass the shield on to Falcon. I'm curious how that dynamic of their characters will start interacting. Whether
I like Falcon.
I do too. I like Anthony Mackie, and
Yeah.
so there's that. The other streaming thing coming is called WandaVision. Now this could be one of 2 different things. Considering that Wanda is still kind of alive in the Marvel universe, cinematic universe. In the comics, Wanda is a mutant that has the ability to actually manipulate the universe around her. Initially, in the comics, it's presented as curses that allow her to kind of like curse a person to do something. So, like, if somebody's trying to shoot at her, she curses them, and then they can't aim at her at all. So, like, they can shoot her a billion times, but they'll never actually hit her. So, or if somebody's trying to chase after her, she curses them, and then they like trip and fall, and like they can't keep chasing after her, kind of stuff.
Okay.
But eventually, it's revealed that her powers were actually able to manipulate the world around them. There's a great story called House of M that basically says that in this new universe here, that Wanda has a family. Her father, Magneto, is kind of the leader of the human race of the Earth here, and that they're actually more mutants than there are humans, and all the humans are kind of like slave labor, lower class citizens, while the mutants are upper class citizens and have all the full rights and powers.
Lovely.
Yeah, so it's the complete opposite of what the original X-Men universe was. So I think what might happen here. There's also a storyline.
So you're going to have a WandaVerse?
So you might have a WandaVerse kind of happening. But what also kind of happens here as well is that Vision at one point, in especially more later comics here, because he's still kind of around and he's not actually dating Wanda anymore,
Yeah.
is actually trying to create his own family. So he creates kind of like a 1950s sort of like family of other Vision characters in his own mental projection sort of thing. Scenario, I guess, is again the best way to put it. So what I think what might happen here is that Wanda might still have feelings for Vision and might create her own universe that allows her to continue to interact with Vision. I'm curious to see how that has an impact on the rest of the Marvel universe. This is what I'm kind of interested to see how they do it, because obviously your ability to use some of the older Avengers will kind of stretch a little bit. So as much as you want to keep them relevant and keep them still useful, you may try to use them sparingly so the movies are not capitalizing on them too much. So you can create new heroes versus old heroes.
Well, I was just trying to look on the internet to see if there was any tips as to how they were going to do that. And
they announced it at Comic-Con. They haven't really gone into a lot of detail on how it's going to work just yet.
There's a whole thing on Wanda versus Captain Marvel.
Yeah.
That could be interesting.
Try not to look too deeply into alternate versions of Spider-Man. There's quite a bit.
Interesting.
The other stuff coming to the streaming service here is going to be Loki. And apparently Loki is going to just be when he basically got the Tesseract again in Endgame here. And he's basically just kind of transporting from world to world to world, I guess.
Okay, so now if you were going to define him, he is chaotic evil, right?
I don't think he's chaotic. I don't think he's chaotic evil. I think he's more of a lawful evil.
Lawful evil?
Yeah, because I mean, at the end of the day, he's not intentionally destroying anything, and he's always kind of playing within the rules of the way the universe works. I mean, like maybe kind of like chaotic evil really just kind of paint you as being like a malevolent sort of like, I want everything to burn down. And Loki's not about having everything burnt down. Loki's about making a place for himself that just sees him on the top.
Yeah, but when it seems like there are unintentional casualties.
Yeah, there's
because he just really doesn't care.
No, and yeah, that's the bit here, that he doesn't care about whatever happens around him to other people. He only cares that he himself is on top. And he's even willing to sacrifice his brother to get him to continue to stay on the top so he can have a good life. And I think that's more of a lawful evil, because I mean, in a lot of cases, he's still playing within the rules of everything else that's happening around him. I mean, like, even when he's in Thor Ragnarok, again, I mean, like, his notion here is that, yeah, I'm going to give Thor back to the Collector, or to the leader here, and then I'll just be set back in life, and I'll be back where I belong. So he's playing very much within the law as far as, like, in the rules of how everything works.
Okay.
Chaotic evil would be more like the Joker, I think. Just hell-bent on doing as much damage as possible, I think.
Okay.
Loki's got a thing coming up here. Some of the new movies that they're planning on here are going to be the Shang-Chi, which is going to be the first Asian hero in the MC universe. This will be interesting because it's basically, the notion is this is a kung fu master on the level of Captain America as far as fighting prowess, if not more so. Who's mastered lots of weapons. So I'm interested to see like how they do this movie here.
Well, I mean, if you think back in the day, though, Bruce Lee was certainly very popular.
Very popular, no, absolutely. And this is a character that probably would have been based off of Bruce Lee. Because it did come out around in the 70s, which would have been prime Bruce Lee territory. And the Kung Fu Master gimmick would have been right up Bruce Lee's vantage point. And the character, depending on his depiction, does kind of look like Bruce Lee.
I'm just putting it out there.
Yeah, I'm curious how they do that. How they'll do this. If they'll treat it kind of like the Netflix Daredevil sort of stuff, where Daredevil is blind, but he still does a lot of physical activity and beat 'em ups here to get that point to do that. And again, this is one of those things where I don't know if this will necessarily even be a movie or maybe another TV series. I'm getting the impression from the from the Comic-Con here that it's probably going to be a movie, most likely.
Well, you see lots of short, even short series where there's like 8 episodes, which these days qualifies as a series because people watch on their own time.
Oh, absolutely. We have they did announce that Doctor Strange 2 is still happening, and this probably will include Wanda. And Wanda in the Marvel Universe is often seen as a part of the mystic sort of thing here because of her reality manipulation. So she's kind of considered as a mage, even if not technically a mage, or a sorcerer as a sorcerer. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited to see Doctor Strange 2. It's one of my favorite Marvel characters. They're gonna do a series in The Watchers as an animated series on the Disney streaming service, and they're gonna get some of the older actors to reprise their roles again.
How do you do that on Disney? I mean, you're going to angle it for a younger audience? Does Disney do on their streaming service things for adult audiences?
I don't know. The streaming service literally is just coming out new now.
Okay.
It's not even really even a few months old here.
Okay.
And so a lot of its content right now is a lot of older Disney material here. So like cartoons from like the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Movies of theirs that are probably going to be timed for release, so they're not always up. So like maybe Dumbo's up for 2 months, and then like maybe Pinocchio for another 2 months after that, to kind of keep it as a desire to want to see it.
Okay.
That was actually
so they control their releases of their DVDs that way.
Yeah, which is I think really, which I always think is kind of like silly because like if you really wanted to, you could still get a Little Mermaid or a Pinocchio, you know.
But it's out of the vault for this period of time.
Yeah, but like there's copies that still exist after that, and
in
a lot of cases they're actually cheaper afterwards.
Yeah.
After the vault's closed again, like.
Yeah.
And even then, I mean, like, who wouldn't? I mean, Disney going to make money.
Yep.
Still in what I think is probably the bigger news here is going to be Thor 4, which is Love and Thunder.
People are excited about that.
Now, do you know why people are excited about that?
No.
So people are excited about this for Lady Thor.
Oh, I did hear this.
So Natalie Portman, who famously wasn't in the third one and wasn't in any other previous ones, with the exception of Endgame, where they used archival footage for that. She originally what happened was that in the second movie here, in the second Thor movie here, there was a director who was supposed to be a part of it initially, and she ended up getting released from the film. And the reason Natalie Portman wanted to do the film was because she get to work with this female director, which would have been the first female director of a Marvel movie. And so famously, Natalie Portman couldn't back out of the role at that point. And so did the movie, but basically said, I'm not going to do any more Disney movie. I'm not going to do any more Marvel movies after that, because you guys basically fired this woman director who, you know, like female directors are not a very common thing in the in movies here at all, and so you basically deprived this woman of a paycheck, and so I'm not cool with that at all.
Yeah.
So which again, to Natalie Portman's credit here, like again, you stick up for what you believe in. That's how Guardians of the Galaxy 3 got their original director back.
Excited about that.
Yes. So Guardians.
When is that out?
I think that's probably going to come out sometime next year, most likely. We got to remember that they originally were going to start filming in 2019. Actually,
I want Gamora back.
Well, they're going to have Gamora back. I mean, I think that's going to be the entire point of Guardians of the Galaxy 3. Is to try to reconcile Gamora thing here, and unfortunately, I think what's going to happen here is that Peter Quill is not going to get her to fall in love with her again.
Oh, that's too bad.
I know.
I like them as a couple.
I do too.
He's willing to give up his life for her.
So, but back to Thor 4 here, which will play a part in Guardians of the Galaxy 3. I think what's going to happen in Guardians of the Galaxy 3 here is that Thor is going to lose the ability, is going to become unworthy. I think what there's going to have
So he won't be able to pick up the hammer?
Well, right now he's got his axe, and I don't know where the hammer is going to come back from. The hammer's going to come back from somewhere. I don't know where, but
maybe Cap will bring it back.
No, I don't think so. Because again, like it has to be in where its time was originally, which was the Ancient One's big deal. Is like like Hulk basically made a promise here, but if we turn them back to when they were taken, then it will be like they never left.
Okay.
So I think the hammer's got to return back to the time in which it was at.
Okay.
That could be its own series in and of itself here. How did Captain America put everything back? That could be its own show.
I would like to see that actually.
But again, like Chris Evans has basically said, like I'm not going to do the character anymore. Like he's stepping away from the role, very much in the vein of Sean Connery as 007. Yeah. But no, so I think at some point here, Thor's going to become unworthy and is going to lose his powers, I think. Which is the thing that does happen in the comics.
Okay.
And then as a result here, Natalie Portman, who plays Jane Foster, will be the next person that is worthy and take over the hammer here.
Ooh.
There's a bit here as well where there's a character called Beta Ray Bill, which
great name.
I know, right? Which in the original Marvel continuity here in the 80s, I want to say, was actually able to pick up Thor's hammer. And he became Thor, because originally the scripture of Thor was, whoever shall wield this hammer shall wield the power of Thor. And the original version of Thor was just a guy who found the hammer.
Oh.
Yeah, originally Thor was more or less a power set, not a person. And it was retconned eventually that this person who was acting as Thor, with the powers of Thor, was actually Thor himself in a previous life. And he just picked up the mantle once again. But like the powers of the hammer were basically what gave you the powers of Thor. So this guy named Beta Ray Bill became Thor, and Odin eventually made him his own version of the hammer, which allowed him to have the powers here. Which is what I think will happen, is that Guardians of the Galaxy 3 will introduce Beta Ray Bill, who will take Thor's axe from him. I think what they'll do here is that they'll go back to the dwarf here and make a new hammer for Beta Ray Bill, but like split up the powers of the axe originally to maybe kind of give Beta Ray Bill the power to wield his powers. Because he will have originally stolen it, or maybe that's how Thor gets a new hammer. In the process here, Thor has to do something like either, like maybe like kill Beta Ray Bill or stop him somehow, and it becomes unworthy because of it, and that'll give Natalie Portman the chance to become Thor at that point. Because again, the axe will still kind of exist, and so maybe even Beta Ray Bill somehow being an element of the movie going into Thor 4 is a possibility here somewhere, maybe.
Oh, very cool.
So yeah, so this is kind of a thought process.
I like the idea of Lady Thor.
Well, again, I mean that was a big thing here back in 2007 and 2015, 16, where like again, originally the point of the Lady Thor comic was Thor became unworthy. It's where he gets Stormbreaker from, actually, which is another weapon for him to use. He stops going by the name of Thor and just goes as Odin's son. So he was like the new Odin. And Lady Thor, nobody knew who Lady Thor was originally. With the intention being that Thor was trying to figure out, that the original Thor was trying to figure out who this Lady Thor was, and at the very end of the comic you reveal that it was Jane Foster.
Okay.
So that's in development here. There's a Hawkeye project in development. No clue what that'll be about, because I think Hawkeye's trying to distance himself from that. From that, there is
from the Avengers.
From the Avengers, yeah. Like he very much doesn't want to be a part of that world anymor. And the only reason he was a part of it, initially because of S.H.I.E.L.D., and then, especially in Civil War, after the events of Civil War, he's very much like, no, just gonna be a normal guy. I got to worry about my family now.
Yeah, and he very much takes on that mantle.
A father figure, like very seriously.
Yeah.
So there's that. There's a Black Widow movie. This I'm still kind of vaguely confused whether this is a prequel or not. I want to say it is because again, I mean, like, the notion of them trying to make a new Black Widow seems a little counterproductive because you would think that, like, they would know about it maybe, but who knows? So I think this might be a prequel.
Okay.
And they've also
who do you get to play it if it's a prequel?
They've actually hired an actress, and the actress is being very coy about what her role is.
Okay.
So most people don't know what it is.
Okay.
There is also the last little bit of news they had there was the Blade movie. So Blade, if you remember, was Wesley Snipes in the 90s. Blade was a Marvel character originally, and so it looks like they're going to try to bring him back in some way, shape, or form. I'm not sure what that version will be necessarily. I would love for them to, if they get into the vampire sort of element here, because Marvel, before they ever got into like the superhero genre, did a lot of like offbeat sort of stuff, like monsters and cowboys. Like, again, I would love to see a Marvel version of a Western.
Could be interesting.
Because I think you could have a lot of, like, you don't have to get real sci-fi about it here, but you could have a lot of fun with alien technology or stuff that we consider in the future here now, like maybe like Thor kind of technology. Asgard stuff is there at some form or another, or some sort of cameo like that. I think that could be fun, and I think there's plenty of room for that. I would love to see where Blade kind of takes like vampires and stuff from, if it'll still be a part of the Marvel universe, which probably most likely, versus having it be its own thing. And if it ever references the older movies, which it probably won't. Other stuff that has been announced, not necessarily announced, but kind of like said is going to be happening here. We still got the second Black Panther movie, second Captain America movie, Guardians of the Galaxy 3, which everyone kind of knew was in production.
Sort of the third Captain America movie, right?
Oh, no, Captain Marvel.
I'm sorry, Captain Marvel, okay.
Yes, my apologies if I meant Captain Marvel. They have said that there is going to be a third Spider-Man movie, which is already in production, or in pre-production here. Some of the villains being tossed around are Kraven, which is a hunter, and he would hunt Spider-Man, which would be interesting. And then you
get Mysterio back. I liked him.
Again, I think Mysterio will come back here in like another couple years.
Okay. It's
kind of a reunion sort of thing. If they're able to keep doing a Spider-Man movie every other year, kind of bit here, like they were doing with like a couple of the characters here, like I think you'll get enough after like another 4 or 5, another like 6 or 7 years, that you could have a Sinister Six movie as literally that's this. It would be great if it was the 6th movie.
Okay.
But again, I think you introduced like the 6th villain to lead that here at the end of the day there too, which I'm hoping is Hobgoblin, but we'll get there eventually.
Okay.
There is talks of a X-Men project here. A lot of people think an X-Men TV series on the streaming service would work better for the Marvel continuity versus the movies. It'll be interesting to see how they do a mutant sort of movie here, because or a TV series, because again, I mean, like, mutants have not really existed in the Marvel pantheon. You could say that Wanda and her brother Pietro were originally mutants, but their powers come from the Mind Stone here, somehow enhancing them.
Mm-hmm.
In Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., you have a collection of heroes that basically are mutants, but they're not called mutants. I forget what they're called here in the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. version. If only just because back when Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was first announced in 2012, 2013, Fox still had the right to the mutant license, so that was their way of getting around this, to say they were mutants without actually having them be mutants. Wink and a nod.
Okay.
You even had another TV show that they were trying to do here where they were essentially they were essentially mutants, the Inhumans, but they're just not technically mutants. The difference between the Inhumans versus mutants is basically mutants are born with the gift versus Inhumans are genetically similar to Skrulls because Skrulls had children, and if they're introduced to a gas that activates their powers.
Okay.
So you have to have the gas in order to get the powers here, sort of.
They have to be activated.
Yeah, kind of like a car. You got to turn it on.
Yeah.
So there's that, and then the other one that's exciting for me is Fantastic Four.
Oh, I remember Fantastic Four.
Yeah, so I'm curious to see how they'll reintroduce Fantastic Four. Clearly, it's something they say that they want to do. There's not a timeline for when it'll come out. There's a guy named Movie Bob who has a great film treatment for it, which would be very interesting to see them do. It'd also just be kind of nice if they just go back in time to like the 1950s or 60s and do a movie there.
That's true.
It would be interesting to say where these characters have been, but you could always say that some sort of cosmic event happened here that forced them to disappear for a while, and then they suddenly reappear again in our timeline, a la Captain America. But you would have heard about them perhaps in between then, so don't know. I'm curious to see what they'll do.
Okay.
And so that was most of the big news that came out of Comic-Con here.
So is Marvel Phase 4 really sort of the streaming service? And
well, it's the direction toward the streaming services, I think, is going to be where a lot of their legacy sort of stuff, I think, is going to go. So, like, again, like WandaVision, Loki, Falcon and the Winter Soldier here. I think where you have a lot of the older stuff from Phase 3 will exist inside there. With the exception of stuff that was introduced and in Phase 3, like again, like Captain Marvel, Doctor Strange, Black Panther. A lot of these were all introduced either at the very tail end of Phase 2 or going into or at the beginning of Phase 3.
Okay.
And so I think a lot of the other, again, more or less legacy character stuff that started in either Phase 1 or Phase 2, again, like, we don't know where the Hulk is going to exist in any of this at all. So we really don't have any word on that here at all. We don't really know what's going to happen with, like, Ant-Man and the Wasp, if that's going to continue to happen at all. Again, like, a lot of the stuff we still don't know what's going to happen at all in any of these movies, but that's the fun of the internet and speculation.
Oh, yeah.
Again, I mean, I've already got, like, a couple hundred ideas for, again, like, how I think Thor will work out with Guardians of the Galaxy. But again, who knows?
I like Thor. He's snarky.
Well, again, I'm going to appreciate a chubbier version of Thor in Guardians of the Galaxy. It'll be kind of fun if Chris Hemsworth continues to, because again, Taika Waititi, which was the guy who did Thor Ragnarok, is going to come back again to direct Thor 4: Love and Thunder. And so it'll be interesting to see if James Gunn continues to play Thor off in a kind of jokey manner. And how much...
Yeah, because Thor's very campy these days.
Thor's been not only campy, but very much kind of a... not a comic foil, but more or less kind of a more comical, somewhat character here. Like
He's been comic relief. I mean, he's been... And he shows up in tense situations as comic relief, so... kind of a nice release. Yeah,
I mean, again, it's the whole bravado sort of thing is now with the Asgards and the royal continuity. Like, a lot of this has been kind of like put to the side. It'll be interesting how Valkyrie will lead her people as the new Odin.
That's true, because it's been turned over.
Yeah. Or if she really doesn't even have any powers and really, like, Thor is the new Odin just in waiting. Which I think might be the case, but... we'll see. So what did you think of Spider-Man Far From Home?
I enjoyed it. I hated the end because I would just like him to be happy. I mean, he's clearly aware that there's a burden to being a superhero, and he doesn't really want it.
Yeah.
And yet he kind of does. So because he waits for things to happen that he can respond to when he's not saving the world. So so he's conflicted on that, but he realizes the value of being a normal everyday kid and wanting to go to college and all those things. And I'm sorry that he's not going to get to, because who's going to take him as a college now?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting notion here. How do we get past him being Peter Parker, or how does that change his life for the better or for the worst?
Well, he's no longer going to Harvard.
No, that much is definitely true.
Or MIT.
Or anything at that point here.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see where the story goes next. I think J.K. Simmons is J. Jameson will play a slightly bigger role in kind of antagonizing the city into disliking Spider-Man. I hope that he continues to be somewhat more of a, not necessarily a cameo role, but just kind of like playing in the background sort of stuff.
Yeah, and I kind of think it will, because it seems like introducing that the way it was introduced, it's going to come back.
Yeah, no, I definitely think he's going to come back, and I think he'll come back more in small little cameo bits, like two or three times in the middle of a movie, just to kind of like stir the pot some more, which is kind of what his role has always been.
Yeah.
So that'll happen. I like Spider-Man Far From Home, but the thing that just kind of really annoys me is all the teenager stuff, I guess is the best way to put it.
Because you're not a teenager anymore.
I'm not a teenager anymore. Like a lot of, just like we see a lot of adults being superheroes, them kind of dealing with their stuff, versus like Spider-Man's angsty, he's indecisive.
He's 16.
I know. Like all this, like, oh, I really want to get in love with Mary Jane. I was like, dude, you're a superhero. Man up. How can you be decisive when it comes to saving people's lives, but not decisive about your own love life? I understand. It's just like one of those things where it's like,
Don't you remember first love playing with your head?
True. Very true. So yeah, I'm curious in that kind of aspect to see where it will go from there. I really just wanted more of the Peter Parker stuff to just be more about them kind of making fun of him and the scenarios that it's around him, which they did a fair amount of.
Yeah.
But again, a lot of the fun of a superhero movie is, again, the superhero parts. It's one of those reasons why, if you go back in time to the movie Kick-Ass, I hated all the parts in which it wasn't revolving around the Kick-Ass character. And I'll be the first one to admit I didn't like that movie because it didn't deal with a lot of the superhero stuff. It was like, oh, we're now on this page. Cool, we're doing superhero stuff. We're going at 60 miles an hour, and then we suddenly get to the boring non-superhero stuff, and it's like, oh, we're putting around and get at 5 miles an hour. It's like, we were just at 60. No, we're going to have to go back to 5 miles an hour. It's just, So, but no, again, I still like the movie. I still had a lot of fun with it. I'm curious to see all the little tidbits that they drop and where those pieces will be picked up later.
Yeah, I thought more than some of the other movies, it was fitting for a 10, 12, 14-year-old crowd. Yeah, and that's okay too. Not a lot of real heavy esoteric stuff.
No, but again, it does paint a lot of the eventuality. Oh, one thing I didn't forget to mention here that was very interesting. When Peter Parker is initially speaking with Mysterio while they're in Venice here, and they bring up the topic of alternate realities, he quotes Mysterio quotes Peter as saying, "Oh, this is Earth 616. I'm from Earth like 574 or something like that." Earth 6. So the way Marvel divides its continuity is by numbers. Earth 616 is the main Marvel continuity.
Okay.
So I thought that was a fun little Easter egg for those who are hip on that, because it's really almost never discussed in the actual Marvel continuity that's Earth 616 versus other alternate.
So you'd
universes.
have to be in the know to pick up.
Yeah, you'd have to be like, it's such esoteric sort of unnecessary sort of details, but it's one of those things again where Marvel does a great job of hinting at the small stuff.
Yeah, that's kind of fun.
Yeah. Alrighty, well, I think that'll do it for us here tonight. I want to thank everybody again for listening to us here again tonight as we discuss the ramblings of weird Marvel continuity stuff. Again, like the next couple of years worth of Marvel stuff will certainly be interesting. We'll have all the show notes here again on our website at nerdtutorialpodcast.com. It's also where we have my mom's D&D character at as well. And then we'll also post John's up there as well, and we'll have we'll do a scenario or campaign here in just a couple days, which will be recorded. And then we're going to do, and if you have any comments, questions, critiques, or any ideas for future topics, highly recommend visiting me at Nerd Tutorial. My Facebook page is facebookpage.com/nerdtutorialpodcast.com, where you can reply to our various episodes. Let me know what I got right, wrong, what you think is going to happen. Right now we have a couple pictures of possible barred tieflings for Mom.
Ooh, very good.
So if you wanted to have an impression of what your character would look like, there's a bunch of different options up there.
I will go look.
And if you want to message me on Twitter, you can find me at nerd_tutorial. I am trying to be somewhat active on there, but trying is trying. But thank you so much for joining us here today, and we'll see you guys all next time.
Bye.